Welcome back. Well, today is World Book Day, a day when a large group of people around the world celebrate books and celebrate reading. You know how difficult it can be to teach children to read. Our schools battle with it a little bit. But to encourage a love of reading in young people, it can literally change their lives. Carol Reid is the interim CEO at the Reid Educational Trust. Carol, good afternoon. We talk about teaching to read all the time, but how important is it to go a bit further to instill that love of reading?
Stephen, it's absolutely critical, because if you can't read, you can't educate yourself. You can't learn anything. And as you know, and you've alluded to, the literacy rates in this country are very low. In fact, we're probably at the very bottom of the world list, if not very close to. So literacy for young children in this country is in fact a crisis. And it's a crisis that if we don't actually fix fairly quickly is going to impact negatively on them for the rest of their lives.
I know you can learn about the world online, you can learn about the world through videos and through your phone, but is there something about reading that means you get more information, a deeper understanding? You get more information perhaps more quickly than even through the best produced documentary ever?
Absolutely, because you're having to use your mind while you're reading. If somebody is showing you what it is, you don't really have to exercise anything to get that information into your brain. So there's an extra dimension to reading which you miss if everything is visual. I think there's also just that whole feeling for a child, particularly of holding a book, of looking at the pictures, of imagining what's going on, of thinking of him or herself in that situation. It's completely different.
I was very lucky, privileged as a child to be able to sort of sit on my father's lap as he read to me, as my mother read to me too, on a bed before I went to bed every night. And what that meant was that even now, as an adult, I can't really go to sleep unless I've read a couple of pages of a book. What I'm trying to get to is habits. And I know that in most homes in this country, there may be one book. I think that's the average, one of the figures that I've seen. So what I'm trying to get to is how do we instill that love of reading? How do we get children to actually read for the fun of it?
If there is one book, it probably would be hopefully at least a Bible or a Quran or something like that, but probably not even. One of the things we do at Reid, for exactly what you've just alluded to now, is called group reading, where part of the methodology that we use is to teach children to love reading by reading with the person who's leading the group. Because of that lack of, as you had yourself and as I had, a mom or a dad who read 2 or 3 stories to you before you went to bed. So it doesn't really take the place of it, but it is something that can instill that absolute love of listening to stories and of reading in small children.
And it's about habit forming as well, isn't it? If you start them young,
Correct.
By the time they get older, even when they're teenagers, they'll still want to read.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you can argue that you can get the same amount of enjoyment and pleasure and learning from an electronic device, but I think there's still nothing like paper and the smell of the paper, the feel and touch of the book to really inspire children to just move to greater heights.
I wonder sometimes about the content that we are producing for our children to read. And if you go into a bookshop in an urban area, you will see most of the books have pictures of children that don't look like our children. They're designed for an American or a European or still often a British market. We're South African. Are we producing the right books to encourage our children to read?
I think we're starting to, yes. So, there are very few books in indigenous African languages. That is starting to change. We at Reid print our own books. We have our own imprints. And those we use local artists for the pictures and illustrations, etc. Because the books that you do get from offshore are, in fact, it doesn't really help a child living in rural Limpopo about an Eskimo and a polar bear, because it's just too far removed. So it's starting to change, and I think it's actually becoming not bad at all.
One of the things about books is that you sometimes, you need a blockbuster, right? And I mean, the obvious example in sort of European and American culture would be the Harry Potter books written by a British author. So many children were absorbed by those books. I mean, they're academic works that talk about those children who grew up with Harry Potter, whereas generations before grew up with the Bible. I mean, it's an amazing thing to say, but there are works like that. What I'm trying to get to is, we kind of need our own South African blockbusters, don't we? Things that will encourage children to read.
We do. I don't think we have a few sort of very popular imprints, etc. But we do need something like that. We need a J.K. Rowling who writes Harry Potter for Africans.
Do you think
preferably in indigenous languages?
And I know governments and I know schools try and do the education. I mean, this is one of these things where everyone in society needs to be involved. Now, I don't know if we really get that. And I mean, the problem is, and I'm a parent, I know what it's like when, you know, you have a young child, you need to keep them quiet for 5 minutes. You don't give them a book, you give them your phone. And isn't that the problem?
That's part of the problem. You give them the phone or your iPad. We actually have a lot of our imprints on Spotify. So if you want to give them Spotify and they can listen to a book being read, it might be slightly better than just paging through looking at pictures. But people want to assist, but not everybody has the capacity to, all the time, or the financial ability to assist in making a difference, which is why NGOs, I guess, exist, such as ourselves exist.
Carol Reid, thank you, Interim CEO of the Reid Educational Trust. Really do appreciate the time.